So is everyone ready? Does everyone have a beer? Everyone sitting comfortably? It's not a long talk. I hope it's an interesting talk. So I hope I won't put you to sleep. My name is Tony. I work in the Amsterdam office of Atlassian in our support organization. I'm a lean innovation program manager, which sounds a bit funny, but by the end of the talk, I hope, if I've done my job, that you'll understand what I mean by lean innovation. I think program manager is pretty self-explanatory. So just to give you a bit of history, I've been with Atlassian for about 5 years. I started as a senior engineer helping customers like yourselves with their Jira, Confluence, on-demand issues. And over time, I transitioned to working on our projects team and eventually leading a team doing process innovation projects within support. So tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why we decided we needed a culture of lean innovation, and then I'll get into what it actually is and how we made it happen. So sometimes I have to explain who Atlassian are, but I think I can skip that for tonight. All of you are pretty well familiar. I work with support. We have 5 offices in which we provide support for all of our customers around the clock. We have people who are there to help you, who are awake when you are awake and who are working when you are working. We have over 100 engineers working in these offices, and they help around 3,000 unique customers per month on about 7,000 tickets. So I am the business owner for the site that we use to provide support to our customers, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I've engaged our whole team in figuring out what we should do to best support all of you. He said. So just show of hands, how many other people work in a support organization or a customer service organization or provide support? How about this one? How many people have customers? How many people do work that they expect other people to tell them if they're happy or not happy with? Right? Okay, good. I hope that there'll be enough that you can take away from this. So I work in Atlassian. We have some pretty well publicized values, especially the ones with adult language in them. Open company, no bullshit, for example. But the thing is, these aren't just marketing things. These aren't just things we put on our website. These are things we live. We're still a very young company. We're, some would say, idealistic, but we believe these things, and we find people to work with who believe them as well. We want for every person we hire to be someone that we can trust to support their team, and more importantly, to provide great support for you, our customers. So when I started at Atlassian Support, we had 8 employees in our Amsterdam office, 4 of them on support. Now we have about 3 times the number of customers. We have about 3 times the volume of tickets. And we have 2 times the number of staff. So we looked at where we were a couple of years ago, and we projected forward how long it takes us to find someone with those values. And we said, as we grow, we're going to get to the point where we can't hire people quickly enough who would give you a good experience as a customer. They have to have a high degree of technical skill. They have to have great communication skills. They have to like helping people. And we couldn't find enough of those quickly enough. So we said, you know what? We can't scale linearly. We can't just add bodies. So as we grew 3 times as large in terms of our customers, 3 times as large in terms of our call volume, but only 2 times as large in terms of our staff. And I'll explain to you how we did that. So what we saw a few years ago when we sat back and looked at the challenge of scale, we're growing about 30% year on year, which is a great problem to have. But we saw that if we reacted to today, if we just kept adding bodies, we wouldn't be very happy. We wouldn't be able to give you a good experience, and we wouldn't be able to add enough people. We would spend all of our time reviewing resumes and none of our time actually doing fun things to make your lives better. So what we figured out is that we should step away a bit, build in just enough capacity for us to look at where we are, reflect on where we are, and actually think about how can we avoid doing the same thing over and over again, a treadmill, answering the same calls day after day after day, and how can we instead build for tomorrow. So to get us ready for this, we stepped back and we said, okay, one of the tenets of the lean startup community is get out of the building. And we did that. We went out and we interviewed our customers. We interviewed other support organizations. We interviewed organizations that provide customer service in completely different contexts. For example, retail or manufacturing. And we took thousands of pages of notes. We did hundreds of interviews. And we came up with 3 programs to help us build for tomorrow. And I am leading up one of those programs, which is Lean Innovation. So that still doesn't tell you what that means. So let's get to that. So again, the title of the talk, Building a Culture of Lean Innovation. So I'll tell you what I mean by lean, innovation, and culture. So in our case, lean is a mixture of things. It's lean as in Kanban. We definitely use rapid boards in Jira Agile. I have to remember the name change myself. We use lean as in Toyota. We use a lot of ideas coming out of actual lean manufacturing. And we especially use ideas coming out of lean startup. And I'll get into each of these things in the course of the talk. Innovation, as part of our process of stepping back and thinking about how we could address our challenges, we worked with IDEO, actually with the Munich office of IDEO. They came in and consulted with us to figure out how we could actually get creative about the problems we faced, right? Not just look at what the industry is doing, but actually come up with new solutions, solutions that fit not only ourselves and our size, but our customers. And the culture part is the most important and the most interesting, he said. So what we looked at, again, this is a kind of our image of scale. We had a project team, a traditional project team, like a lot of organizations would. We had people who were charged with figuring out what's wrong, figuring out what we should do differently, and then making that happen. And this was a small core team at the time, about 5 people. And what we realized is that our challenges were going to get so big that we couldn't scale a project team quickly enough. We couldn't scale our capacity to implement changes quickly enough unless we did something a little different. Unless we built the freedom and the responsibility to innovate into our daily work. So in a lot of companies, this freedom and this responsibility to innovate looks like 20% time. Some operation teams will have 5% time. So how many people use 20% time? 5% time? Okay. But how many people have heard of 20% time? How many people would like to do 20% time someday? Right, okay. So what we realized was 20% time, it's a good idea, but in our case, it wasn't enough. So we set a wildly ambitious goal for 2020. So it's not like we're saying we're going to do this tomorrow. But we said by 2020, we're going to be 80% off the queue and looking toward the future. 20%, we're still reacting to stuff we couldn't predict. We're still addressing the problems that come in today and giving you the help we need, no matter how it got to us. But 80% of the time, we're thinking about how did the work we reacted to today, the things that interrupted us, how did they get to us? How do we avoid them? And more importantly, where are our customers heading? Where are we heading in the future? So this is the kind of big goal that you get in Lean, like Six Sigma or higher, where you may never get there, but the journey alone helps you a lot. So he said. So how did we decide to approach this? How did we decide to get there? This is my version of a diagram that you'll see a lot of variations on. So the idea is, if you want to find a really engaging thing to do with your life, you need to find something where you have passion, you have ability, and you can provide value. If you are passionate about something, you love doing it for its own sake, and you have the ability to do it, but no one will pay you to do it, or your work is not valued, it's a hobby. If you have passion, if you have ability and value, in other words, you know how to make things happen and you can get paid to do it, that's great. But it's more of a mercenary kind of thing, a clock punching thing. You're coming to work, you're doing the job, you're getting paid, and you're going home. It's not touching you in your heart. Where we found ourselves was we had passion and then some sense of value, and all we needed was the ability, and that's a great opportunity to have, because it means you have people who are motivated to learn what they need to do and actually grow to meet the challenges and kind of ease themselves toward that ideal dream job. So, woo, I think I just skipped a couple slides, but that's all right. So, the first thing we had to figure out, woo, he said, was how to give them the ability, right? Because they already have the passion, and we have a lot of people who can help them with the value part. But we had to figure out, okay, how are they even going to be able to do this? And we figured there's 3 parts to this. They need the time, actually, to step away from the treadmill and think about what they're doing, try something new. They need some skills, project management skills, sort of light product management skills, a lot of development skills, a few admin skills, writing skills, communication skills. They have to be able to convince people that what they want to do is worth doing. And then finally, they need access. They need to be able to actually make changes. They need to be, not only do we say that they're empowered, but they need to actually be able to have a chance of getting the things that they say we should do out there for people to try. So I'll talk about each of these things. So our first goal was to make the time. And to do this, we used a tool coming straight out of Toyota Lean. So don't worry about your eyes bleeding with the tiny fonts or trying to make sense of this. I'll kind of break it down more simply. This is actually what a value stream mapping is roughly supposed to look like. It just represents the whole cycle of your activity from when the customer asks you for something to when you deliver it. And you can represent that a bit more simply just by looking at the linear sequence. So in our case, what we provide, as you heard in the previous talk, what we provide is knowledge, right? We are here to get people the answers they need to get back to work as quickly as possible. So within support, we have a saying that our customers, they're not in business to actually support our products, to run our products. They're in business to build cars, to build rockets, to build teams and services. They don't want to spend time fighting our products, and our job is to get them back to work. So we look at, from start to finish, when something comes in to when it goes out, and then break it down in terms of which of these activities helped give the customer what they need, and which of them are low value. They're things that we feel we have to do, but they don't make any difference to you. In fact, they keep you from getting your answer as quickly as possible. So again, we look at, we're reacting to today 100% of the time. We identify low value activities, and then we free up the time to work on proactive work by eliminating low value activities. So that's the idea behind getting the time. I'll talk a bit about the results a little later. But once they have the time to do things, how do we help our teams build the skills they need? So the thing is, we don't hire people who are trained to follow a script. We don't hire people who are just going to read what someone says they should do and do it. Every one of our engineers from level 1 to level 3, they're highly technical. They're coming out of other roles where they've been doing things like administering systems, developing code, writing content, giving presentations to a room full of people, analyzing problems, and managing projects. So to have them read a script, in essence, it's a waste. We decided instead to give them a lightweight model to try new things and to coach them on every aspect of that process. So remember I said we took a lot of ideas from Lean Startup. One of the key ideas we took is the build, measure, learn cycle. A lot of times we'll start one rotation off. We'll measure first because we have a lot of good data already. But the idea is the same. The idea is that you test your understanding of the way the world works. So let me back up just a second. How many people are familiar with Lean Startup? How many people actually use it in their work? Right. So the idea is you have a model of the way you think the world works. You have something that you want to do that you think will get you more money, reduce a problem that you have. But if you're not actually measuring it, it's just opinion and superstition almost. The idea behind build, measure, and learn is you want to have the lowest cost to actually find out, does the world work the way I think it does? And am I making the change that I think I'm making? So we give them that lightweight model, and then we say, OK, you can go submit an idea and actually go down the road to getting it in production. As a business owner, I'm opening the door and saying to everyone, I'm going to coach you on making changes on the system that I'm responsible for. It's a bit terrifying, but there's some safety checks in place that we'll talk about. But the goal is still the same. The goal is actually to have 100 people who could be submitting ideas and potentially changes. So why did we think this was important? So on the left, we have kind of a representation of management, project teams, and they're coming up with ideas, coming up with strategy, throwing it at the operations team. And the operations team, they see them as management. They see that they don't think they relate. You push an idea out, it hits a wall, and you have to drag people over the line. You have to fight them. You have to make rules to say, you have to do this thing that make this change that we're telling you. It's not a good model for change. It's like an anchor that drags you back. Right, so what we decided was, let's take another idea from Lean and kind of open it up and say, you know what? We're not the deciders. We're not the only people who come up with ideas for where we are and what we need to do. You guys are helping our customers every single day. You're seeing what's happening every single day. So we added the equivalent of the andon chord. Anybody heard of the andon chord? It's a concept coming out of lean manufacturing where every worker has the ability to stop the production line if there's a fault. And the idea is you catch a fault at station 1 before you keep working on it on stations 2 through 20. The earlier you catch the fault, the better it is. And at first, it's chaos. You're stopping the line all the time, but over time, you've eliminated all of the easy stuff, and everyone feels empowered to actually stop it when it's needed. So our equivalent of this is just a little drop-down form. That's at the top of everyone's screen. And if they encounter something that doesn't work, take a screenshot, write it up, send it in, and we get hundreds of these a month. And a lot of these, they catch things that we need to be aware of. They've noticed new trends. They see patterns. They'll come and say, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we're getting a lot of issues like this. Maybe we need to look at the way we handle mail. Or basically, they are our eyes and ears. They are our intelligence gathering network. So once you have your operations team generating ideas, you can move from us versus them to us versus the problem. The ideas are coming from, you still have ideas that come from management and from the project team. You have ideas that come from operations, and you combine those and you filter those down into big ideas that everyone understands and believes in. And actually, it makes change much easier. You're not fighting people. They're anxious for the things that you're working with them on because A, they understand it, B, they understand the problem, and they're involved in the solution. So this is where we kind of take a step back toward value, which is a key part of this. We hire for passion. We hire for people who have empathy, who care about how other people feel, who like helping other people. So we have also a lot of intelligent people. So when you get passionate and intelligent people, you can get some really fierce arguments. And what we use value for is to take a little bit of the heat out of the arguments and give people an easy way to say, okay, rather than just opinions, let's see orders of magnitude, which way to go. And I'll get into this just a bit. So I asked them not for a detailed analysis of the problem space, not for a detailed analysis of the benefit of an idea, but just for orders of magnitude, right? I use a couple of analogies, but I'll share one with you. So if they're going to try something new and they want to succeed, it's like they're blindfolded and there's a table with gold on it, and they get one hit to knock off as much as they can, right? They don't know where the table is. They don't know where their arm is relative to it. They get one swipe. If there's €2 on that table, their chances of succeeding and making a difference for their time are a lot lower than if there's 2,000 on the table. They may not get 2,000, but they'll get a lot more just because it's a bigger problem. So I want them to give me, is this something that could save us a quarter of a person's time, 1 person's time, 5 persons' time, 10 persons' time? Those kind of orders of magnitude, because then we can coach them on a few other things that we'll talk about in a bit. So, nice talk. Sounds very visionary. Sounds kind of crazy. But has it worked? So when we started out, we had about 13 engineers worth of waste that we estimated, potential, that we could recover. And we formed the team in January. And in our first 3 months, we estimate we recovered about 3 engineers worth of time. And the idea is that we would be delivering that quarter after quarter and actually delivering more as we involve more and more of the teams. At the beginning, we had projects that were run by the core projects team with a few people participating. Now we have projects that are run completely within the operations team. So, and as I said, because we have the teams and operations working together, we can hit a much wider range of ideas in the same amount of time. And this is really important because in the experimentation model, if you try one thing, and let's say you have a 20% chance of succeeding, it's not going to have as much impact as if you try 5 things in the same amount of time. The idea is you get good at trying things very quickly and finding the things that work, throwing out the things that don't. Rapid innovation. We want week-long sprints. Every week we say, this is what's coming next week. And then we say, this is what we put on last week, and this is how it worked. So what have we learned from doing this? I mean, I've given you kind of the rosy view, but I'll tell you some of the things that we didn't get right or that we had to learn. So we put the andon chord out there. We said, you're in the middle of your work. Tell me what's wrong. And we got a lot of reactive ideas. And this is meant to represent a squeaky wheel on your shopping cart, pulling you a little to the side. It's an annoyance, but it's not as important as your shopping cart being on fire. They would see the little things, react to the little things, and miss the big things. So we had to do a lot of coaching around finding the right set of big priority issues. So the coaching that I do lately is around, they make a list every month of the things that they would like to work on, the things that they've agreed are the most important things to work on, and I coach them on the length of that list. You can't possibly achieve 50 ideas with the team you have. You've got to choose. We coach them on, is this a small idea? Is this a big idea, for example? We also coach on problems rather than solutions. So these are engineers. They kind of get ahead of themselves and they think of not just a little bit about the problem, they think a lot about how to solve it, including the implementation details. And they'll come to you with, this is exactly how I think we should address this, and I'm not going to be happy unless we do it that way, even if it completely doesn't fit. So what we had to do was step back and say, okay, I know that you've got one solution to this. I want you to tell me the underlying problem. And then let's brainstorm 99 other solutions. And let's see which one of those is likely to have the biggest impact. Let's see if we can't come up with something better together than one person's idea of the problem, the solution, and the implementation. Another thing we learned is you can't task people for activity. Initially, we wanted participation. So we said, right, you have to participate in 3 experiments a quarter as a team. So everybody grab a bucket of water. When really what we should have said was, guys, the goal is to put out the fire. I don't care if you get a hose, as long as you put out the fire. If there's 10 of us standing around with buckets and the fire is still raging, we haven't met the goal. So now we task on outcomes. We say, okay, you have a budget. Right now it's 20% of your time to go out and work toward the future. But you have to write it up and show me that at least in the short term you're recovering the time that you're spending. Right? So we say the outcome is at least to get back the time that you're spending on investment. And then the secondary benefits, which are you gaining skills to execute on projects, we get on top of that. But at least we get back the time that you're spending. So this is an obvious idea to anyone who's run a development team, who's run a sprint, who's run a scrum. But we had to teach them about limiting work in progress. These are people who are working on operations queues. Every issue that comes in today has to be dealt with, right? It doesn't matter if there's 100 of them, you're going to have to find a way, call in people from other regions, stay late. That's kind of it doesn't lend itself to that kind of thinking. So we had to coach them on, okay, for this other part of your work, you need to limit your work in progress. You can't achieve 10 projects. You'll have 10 quarter or half-finished projects, and you won't be meeting the goal. You won't be putting out the fire. So you need to limit your work in progress. Right, you said. So we did this, obviously, with a lot of our tools. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about that. But keep in mind that these are all things that we use our tools to do that helped us, and that you could do them with a lot of tools. So for example, you need to understand how you're spending your time if you want to do the type of process optimization that we did. In our case, we used the time tracking in Jira, and we did a lot of analysis on top of that. We have a data warehouse that pulls information out of Jira. We did very fine time reporting using the combination of Jira's time logging, its change history, and its workflow, so that we could say, when I assigned an incoming ticket to one of my colleagues, we call it triaging, I spent this much time. So that we can look at that part of our process. If you remember back to the value stream, we can look at that part of our process and say, that's how long that part of the process spends, and we can work to reduce that. So the andon chord is also something that we implemented using one of our plugins, a free plugin. And that is the Jira issue collector, which was one of the highlights of, I guess, the Atlassian road trip. It's been out for a while. But the point is, it's still useful. It lets you embed a simple data collection form in any website, including Jira itself. It's a little strange, but we use the Jira issue collector to collect information about our usage of Jira itself. So that makes it easy to get a lot of data, but what it doesn't do is help you make sense of it. For that, we use the improved issue navigator, which has key bindings, for example, that help you actually manage most of your issues without ever leaving this screen. And that's really useful for going through 20, 30, 50 issues coming in and figuring out what part of our system are we talking about? Are they duplicates? Who should work on it? You can share issues, assign issues, move them between projects, close them as duplicates, all from the same screen. It makes it easy to keep up with the volume. So we also use rapid boards to manage 2 types of work. Right now we use Kanban boards to manage our weekly sprints. We also have an experiment board, which we use with a longer goal. It doesn't have a fixed time period because our teams may have 2 hours this week, 4 hours the next, no hours the third. They need longer timelines. We're trying to combine down to single week sprints, breaking down smaller work packages, but we heavily use rapid boards to help make sure that we're delivering changes regularly, and also to visualize our work in progress. So before I go on, I mentioned a lot of things that you can do with Jira, but the message is not by Jira or by Jira Agile. It's by something, it's more that you need something to help you understand how you're spending your time and plan your work and deliver work on a regular basis. So you also need something to help you outline what you're going to do, build a blueprint, and then communicate it. Again, the goal here is in part engagement. If we're working with 10 teams spread around the world, and each of them potentially is going to put something on our production system, they need to be getting feedback from all the people who are going to use it. And for that, we use Confluence. We plan things in Confluence, we have templates, and then we blog about them. We share them using Confluence so that it becomes our engine of planning and also our engine of sharing, so that by the time something comes out, not only are people aware of it, they're excited about it. So the message is not by Confluence, the message is use something that helps you plan and helps you communicate. Right. So we also are working with people who aren't full-time developers, aren't full-time sysadmins, aren't full-time project administrators. They have been working on the queues for years in some cases. So we need to give them a bit of a safety net as they learn. So for that, we use primarily Bitbucket. Formerly, we used Fisheye Crucible, and Bamboo. And we use that to provide a safety net in the form of formerly code reviews, now pull requests, where developers can get feedback on the quality of their work as they learn, and the work that they deliver meets the standards that the team has established. We also use Bamboo for continuous integration, because as most of you who have customized your Jira instance will know, whenever you do an upgrade, you have to actually look at each of your customizations to make sure they still work. And we have a lot of customizations. So we use Bamboo to say, of our holdings, what's still going to work when they release Jira 6.1, 6.2, et cetera. We test in advance with milestone releases, and we plan the work. Often, the teams that actually build an improvement will be drawn in to support that as well. We'll say, this thing that you've made is useful. It won't work in Jira 6.1. You have about 3 weeks to find the time you need to fix it. And we fold them into our sprints. So that's it. That's a bit of people, processes, and tools. And now it's the fun part, which is questions and comments. So, are we all asleep? So, questions? Uh-oh. Yes?
Can you tell us about any of those increments that have come out from such a...
Sure. I'd be happy to give you an example. So I'll give you two from our hosted team. So when a new problem comes out, let's say you're the first customer who reports a problem. If we wait until we write down the knowledge, make a knowledge base article or a FAQ, and get that indexed by Google and all of these things, it can be 2 weeks or a month before we can help the second customer with the same problem. So our goal is to actually get out in front and say, can I help the second customer 15 minutes later, right? Or, so day zero problems, for example, are a great use for this. And one of our teams said, you know what? We already are keeping a list of all of the problems that are currently impacting our hosting environment, right? These are the things that came out that we have weekly releases. These are the things that we're aware of that have come out in this week's release. And here's a list of the ones you can fix yourself and the ones that you need to ask us to help you fix. And they said, you know what? When you come to put in a ticket, if we know you're an on-demand customer, we should say, hey, you might have another problem, but a lot of people have these, right? So we get out in front of them and they can say, oh, well, you're already aware of it. Oh, wow, I can fix it myself. Oh. And the second through 20th person can just fix it themselves, and they're happy and we're happy, right? So we have projects like that that are being run all the time, and as we see them succeed, we build them in as permanent parts of our process. So if you go today to our support@Atlassian.com, we have a completely new issue creation screen that combines a bunch of things that we've learned from putting knowledge in front of people. It's still an experiment. Probably you won't see a product that looks like that. But as a customer, you don't have to wait. You can actually get the help you need up front. So we do a lot of experimentation in areas like that, and many of those are run from within the teams. They come to us passionate about a project, we coach them on all the skills they need, we help get them over the line, and then we turn it around and our customers can really use it. So, other questions? Is it too hot for questions? Too little beer for questions? Yes.
I had a beer too. So.
Yeah, good.
But anyhow, I would be interested in how many people are involved now in the lean innovation. What was the third word?
Program.
Yeah.
So, in theory, everyone,
yes.
right, on our support team, which is 120 engineers, including the project team. But our biggest projects still tend to be run by the project team. They're used to running big things, right? But we bring in engineers to work on those teams so that they see what it's like to work on a big team. And then they independently will run mid-sized projects on their own. So in a given week, we might have 3 or 4 teams of 3 to 5 people working globally in addition to the project team. So maybe 20 people, 25 people. We're still working towards 20% proactive, which is, I guess depending on how you squint and look at it, we're close on some days. But our goal is to have robust teams working in every environment. And to do that, we say, okay, as a business owner, I say, okay, I'm going to have a delegate in each region, and you can work through them, for example. We try to scale every part of the process. So all of us on the project team, we're still building big projects, but each one of us, I'd say to them, we're not doing our job if there aren't 2 people behind you who are learning how to do things at the scale you're doing today. So that when I pull you up to the next level, there's 2 people behind you. So we're still working on it, but we've grown an amazing new generation of stars from within our team, which was wonderful. I love it.
Did you start with that complete team of 120 people involved, or did you do like a pilot phase up front and then expand?
It's open to everyone from day one.
Okay.
We had a harder time with engaging some of the other teams, so we have the most people who work on it in EMEA, so we had the biggest level of engagement in EMEA, but now we have each team finding a way that it can contribute. So for example, a lot of our team that does knowledge-centered support are in San Francisco, so we have a lot of operations teams running projects under their guidance. Our developers are obviously in Sydney, so now we have a growing group of people who are running development-focused projects, in other words, in-product help, faster bug fixes, etc., with the development teams.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so.
But, how do you interact with the development teams?
Right, so we have 3 programs. I mentioned Lean Innovation, which is about execution. We also have a knowledge team, and finally we have we call it service enablement team, but really it's liaising between support and developers. We feed back a lot of information to them on these are the pain points. So for example, there was a lot of work around improving LDAP in Jira 4.3 and Confluence. I forget the version of Confluence, but around the same time, they both got a new LDAP version. And of course, people still have problems with LDAP, but the number of people who had bad problems and had to work with us on 6-month-long cases went way down because we kept saying, this is our #1 pain point, we spend the most time on it, people hate it, right? And we have a team that does just that, sits in with sprints, learns about new things coming out, gets us involved in QA, for example. QA is an incredible one for support to do because we see how you use the tools. It doesn't matter if they have user stories around how they think the tool should be used. We're hearing from you how you're actually using the tool.
How about new features? Do they also go through the support team first, or do they get feedback, or does the development team take feedback from the support team in advance on new features?
Right. So we have a very open company, and so all of our feature requests are in public, right? We have, just as we've grown, we have a few things where you don't need to know about these problems that only came up while we were building the tool. We keep those off to here, but everything that's out in the wild is in public. So when someone comes to us and says, typically, I need to be able to do this thing with Jira, or this thing with Confluence, we break that down and say, okay, it's not a core feature, I've created a feature request for you. Here's a couple of workarounds, maybe third-party plugins, and over time, people vote on them, people comment on them. When I was an engineer, I would always encourage people to go and actually start the discussion with the developers, flesh out the use case so they understand what you're really trying to do. And all of that happens in public. So we push for the ones that we see the most people asking for. We, for example, will say, not only is this out here and people are voting on it, but we're getting support tickets around it. And we use all of those as part of the calculus that goes into what gets fixed. Yes?
I think the Atlassian support team gives very fast answers, and it's also extremely friendly. So I think that works well, but I'm still not 100% happy with the support.
Sure.
Because you asked in the beginning, how can you avoid answering the same questions over and over again? And you said you have 7,000 tickets a month.
Yes.
So I think you would have less tickets if you fixed bugs.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I have 70% bugs that others run into too. So have you thought of making the development team fatter to make the support
Sure.
leaner?
So that's part of what the service enablement team is meant to do. So, for example, we haven't gone as far with it, but there are ideas like having developers who report to support for bug fix teams. They have bug fix rotations, but especially in our on-demand environment, we give them they get really immediate feedback. There was a great discussion the other day about how if we have a problem that only affects 0.01% of our users, we still will get 200 tickets, right? So the discussions are happening. I won't say we've got it perfect, and there's still plenty of bugs that we're aware of, but we do work on it. So if you've got any in particular, I'm always happy to go and kick up dust. No, I mean, catch me afterward. Yeah. So maybe one more? Anyone else? Right. Okay. Well, if you want to talk about anything else, especially development tools, I didn't go into real depth, but I'm around for all the networking, and I'd love to especially hear how you're using our tools. I know how we use our tools. I'd like to hear how you use it. So.
Actually, it's not important. Oh, it's
okay. I'm just going to walk that way once we turn off the computer. Right. Great. Thank you, everyone.